I'm not saying the Galactic Council was stupid. That would be rude. Unprofessional, even. But when Ambassador Crix Tal of the Harmonious Collective watched the human named Marcus Chen casually let two full-grown Terran felines drape themselves across his workspace like furry paperweights, the word stupid did flicker through his mind. Several times, in neon letters, with accompanying warning sirens. Ambassador Crix Tal, Marcus said, not looking up from his datapad, which was currently being used as a heated bed by something the humans called a tabby cat. The second creature, an orange monstrosity that weighed at least 6 kilograms, had decided that Marcus's actual notebook, the one with actual important treaty negotiations written in it, made an excellent pillow. Did you need something, or are you just going to stand there making that face? Crix Tal's translator implant struggled with that face. His species didn't really do faces, being mostly crystalline structures that communicated through light patterns. But he got the general idea. He was being judged by a human, while said human allowed apex predators to sleep on classified documents. I was merely observing, Crix Tal said, his internal lights flickering what he hoped was a casual purple. The security protocols of your species. Marcus finally looked up, and his face did that thing humans called smiling, which every other species in the galaxy had agreed was absolutely terrifying when you really thought about it. Baring teeth, as a sign of friendliness. Sure, and the Vrexian Empire totally invaded 3 systems for diplomatic reasons. Security protocols? Marcus reached over and scratched behind the orange cat's ear. The creature immediately began producing a rhythmic vibration that Marcus's file had labeled purring, and the rest of the galaxy had labeled the sound a malfunctioning reactor core makes right before it explodes. Yes, you are aware that document contains the trade agreements between Terra and the Silicate Consortium? Uh-huh. And you have placed 2 Terran predators directly on top of it. They're not on it, they're near it. Marcus made this distinction as though it mattered. The orange one's tail was literally covering paragraph 3, subsection B, regarding mineral rights in the Tau Ceti system. Besides, that's just my scratch paper. The real documents are in the system. That does not address my primary concern. Which is? Crix Tal's lights flashed in exasperated amber. You have domesticated apex predators. Marcus blinked. Then he looked at the cats, then back at Crix Tal, then at the cats again. The tabby yawned, displaying an impressive array of sharp teeth designed by evolution specifically for puncturing vital organs. And Marcus responded to this threat display by cooing, "Who's a sleepy boy?" in a voice that would have gotten him laughed out of any Galactic Council negotiation. They're cats, Marcus said. I am aware of their designation. They're like 10 pounds. Irrelevant. Mr. Whiskers here couldn't hurt a fly. Well, actually, he's great at hurting flies. Caught 3 yesterday. But he's harmless to people. Mr. Whiskers. The human had named a predator Mr. Whiskers. Crix Tal was beginning to understand why the Terran delegation gave everyone else in the galaxy stress-induced crystal fractures. According to our xenobiological database, Crix Tal said, pulling up a holographic display because he'd learned that humans respected visual aids. Terran Felis catus are descended from Felis sylvestris libica, obligate carnivores with a hunting success rate of approximately 32%, which is higher than the Terran lion. Well, yeah, cats are really good hunters. Marcus said this with what appeared to be pride. Pride in his predator's ability to kill things. That's why we domesticated them, kept the mice out of our grain stores. You invited them into your food storage. They ate the things eating our food storage. You could have sealed your food storage. We did. The mice got in anyway. Then the cats got in. Then we just sort of gave up and accepted we were living with both mice and cats, and we figured we liked the cats better. The logical inconsistencies in human evolution were giving Krikstal the crystalline equivalent of a migraine. So, you formed a symbiotic relationship with predators. I mean, if you want to get technical about it, sure. Based on their superior hunting capabilities. Yep. And now you let them sleep on your important documents. Well, they worked hard. Deserve a rest. The orange cat, as if on cue, stretched, extended claws that could absolutely puncture Krikstal's dermal plating, and then flopped over on its other side, now covering paragraph 7 regarding shipping lane regulations. Marcus just smiled and adjusted his datapad to a different angle. Krikstal tried a different approach. How long have your species coexisted? With cats? About 10,000 years, give or take. 10,000 cycles. Humans had been living with predators for 10,000 cycles. The harmonious collective had existed as a civilization for 8,000 cycles and hadn't domesticated anything more dangerous than a photosynthetic moss that occasionally changed colors in a mildly alarming way. And in that time, how many attacks? Marcus's eyebrows rose. Attacks? Yes. Surely these creatures occasionally revert to their predatory nature? Oh, sure, all the time. Finally, Krikstal thought. Acknowledgement of the danger. And how do you defend yourself? Usually by saying ow and then checking if they broke skin. Marcus held up a hand that had several small scratches on it. Mr. Whiskers got a little excited during playtime yesterday. Didn't mean anything by it. The creature had drawn blood, and the human's response was to diminish the attack as playtime. This was fine. Everything was fine. Krikstal's lights definitely weren't, flickering the panicked magenta that indicated imminent system failure. Let me see if I understand correctly. Krikstal said slowly. Your species has integrated obligate carnivores into your living spaces. You permit them access to important documents, food preparation areas, and sleeping quarters. They occasionally attack you, and your response is to consider this normal behavior. When you say it like that, it sounds weird. It is weird. Look, Ambassador, I don't tell you how to coexist with whatever you people consider pets. We do not have pets. We have domesticated several species of crystalline formations that assist with light refraction for communication purposes. But they are not pets. Sounds boring. They do not sleep on classified documents. That's because you don't have documents. You have light patterns. Marcus scratched the tabby under the chin. The creature's purring intensified, reaching frequencies that Krikstal's sensors registered as mildly threatening. And anyway, what's the big deal? So they're sleeping on my notebook. They're comfortable. I'm comfortable. We're all comfortable. The big deal, Krikstal said, his patience crystallizing into something sharp and brittle, is that this is a pattern we have observed across all human behavior. You domesticate predators. You befriend creatures that should rightfully terrify you. You pack bond with anything that stands still long enough. Your military flagship has a cat. 3 cats. Excuse me? The HMS Indomitable has 3 cats. Captain Rodriguez is very proud of them. They have their own social media accounts. Krikstal didn't know what social media accounts were, and he absolutely did not want to find out. You are proving my point, which is that humans are insane. Marcus considered this for a moment. The orange cat woke up, yawned again, and began kneading its claws against the notebook. The sound of claws on paper should not have been that threatening. It really shouldn't have. And yet... Okay, Marcus said finally. Maybe a little insane. But here's the thing, Ambassador. You're focusing on the wrong part of the equation. Enlighten me. You're worried about the predators, the teeth, the claws, the hunting instincts. You're thinking, how can the humans trust these creatures? How can they let them into their homes? Marcus's smile turned into something that was probably meant to be reassuring, but landed somewhere in the vicinity of mildly concerning. But you're forgetting something important. What could I possibly be forgetting? These predators chose to trust us first. Krikstal's light stuttered. Explain. Marcus leaned back in his chair, careful not to disturb Mr. Whiskers, who had decided that actually the warm lap was better than the cold notebook. Cats are solitary hunters, right? They don't need packs. They don't need families. They're perfectly capable of surviving on their own. But about 10,000 years ago, some cats wandered into human settlements and thought, you know what? These tall apes aren't so bad. They have food, they have warm places to sleep, and they give good head scratches. That is not how domestication works. With dogs, sure. We domesticated dogs, bred them for specific purposes, changed them over generations. But cats... Marcus shook his head. Cats domesticated themselves. They chose us. And yeah, they're predators. They've got teeth and claws and hunting instincts. But they decided that living with humans was better than living alone. The orange cat had now transferred entirely to Marcus's lap and was gazing up at him with eyes that Krikstal's xenobiological database informed him were optimized for low-light hunting. The human gazed back with what his file called affection. So you are saying, Krikstal said slowly, that the predators trust you, and therefore you trust them. Basically. That is the foundation of your entire human-feline relationship. Yep. Mutual trust between predator and prey. We're not really prey, though. That's kind of the point. Marcus scratched behind the orange cat's ears, eliciting more of that ominous purring. Humans aren't at the top of the food chain because we're the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. We're at the top because we're really, really good at making friends with things that are bigger, stronger, and faster than us. This was possibly the most threatening thing Krikstal had heard in his entire diplomatic career. And he'd once sat through a 3-hour presentation by the Rexian Empire on their peaceful military expansion protocols. You befriend predators as a survival strategy. Not really a strategy, more like a personality trait. Marcus was now using both hands to pet both cats, having apparently given up entirely on work. The tabby had migrated from the datapad to Marcus's shoulder, where it perched like some kind of furry, purring gargoyle. We're social creatures. We like making friends. Sometimes those friends have claws. And this does not concern you. Why would it concern me? Look at them. They're babies. The babies in question were fully grown predators with bite forces capable of crushing small bones. But Krikstal had learned that arguing with humans about their categorization of dangerous fauna was an exercise in futility. They called sharks sea puppies. They tried to pet wild bears. They had a documented history of attempting to ride creatures that could easily kill them, apparently for entertainment purposes. Let me ask you something, Ambassador, Marcus said, his tone shifting slightly. Why are you so worried about the cats? Because they are predators in close proximity to important documents and personnel. Sure, but really, why does it bother you? Krikstal's lights flickered through several colors as he processed the question. Why did it bother him? The logical answer was obvious. Predators were dangerous. Proximity to danger was bad. Therefore, human behavior was concerning. But there was another answer, one that was harder to articulate through his translator implant. Because, Krixtal said finally, it should not work. Your species should not have survived this tendency. You should have been killed by the very creatures you invited into your homes. And yet you not only survived, you thrived. You reached the stars with predators at your side. Your ships have cats. Your stations have dogs. Your embassies have creatures that could kill you without effort, and you treat them like cherished companions. And that scares you. It defies every principle of evolutionary biology and game theory. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that. From the outside, it probably looks insane. It is insane. Maybe. The orange cat yawned again, stretched, and resettled into an even more comfortable position on Marcus's lap. But here's the thing. That tendency you're worried about? That insane human habit of befriending everything that moves, that's not a bug, Ambassador. It's a feature. Explain. We made it to space because we learned to cooperate. Not just with each other, but with anything and everything that would work with us. We partnered with wolves, and they became dogs. We partnered with cats, and they became, well, cats. But friendlier cats. We partnered with horses, with cattle, with birds, with anything that would have us. And every partnership made us stronger. Marcus leaned forward slightly, careful not to disturb his furry companions. You want to know the real reason the Galactic Council is so nervous about humanity joining? It's not because we're aggressive. It's not because we're expansionist. It's because we're really good at making friends. And that terrifies species who think power comes from standing alone. Krixtal's lights pulsed a thoughtful violet. You believe your tendency toward pack bonding is a diplomatic advantage. I know it is. Look at this station. 3 years ago, it was a neutral meeting ground where everyone tolerated each other. Now, the silicates are teaching humans their light songs. The Vrexians are learning human cooking. The Harmonious Collective has a cultural exchange program. Marcus smiled. And it all started because someone brought a cat to a diplomatic function and everyone wanted to pet it. This was historically accurate, though Krixtal preferred not to remember the incident. It had been undignified watching Ambassador Vrexkor, terror of 3 star systems, cooing at a small, orange creature that had wandered into the treaty signing. A small, orange creature that looked suspiciously similar to the one currently sleeping on Marcus's classified documents. That was your cat? Krixtal said accusingly. Marmalade does love a good summit meeting. Marcus grinned. Lots of new people to charm. You brought a predator to a treaty negotiation. And the treaty got signed, didn't it? Fastest negotiation in Council history. Marcus shrugged. Turns out it's hard to argue about mining rights when there's a cute cat demanding attention from everyone at the table. That is manipulation. That's diplomacy. Marcus stood up carefully, cradling Marmalade in his arms. Mr. Whiskers remained on his shoulder, apparently boneless. Look, Ambassador, I get it. Humans are weird. We do things that don't make sense to other species. We trust things we shouldn't trust. We befriend things we shouldn't befriend. But that's who we are. And honestly, it's worked out pretty well for us. Krixtal watched the human carry 2 apex predators toward the door. Both creatures completely relaxed in his arms, utterly trusting. It was absurd. It was illogical. It was probably going to give him crystal fractures for the next decade. It was also, he had to admit, kind of impressive. Marcus, Krixtal called out before the human could leave. One question. Sure. Do the cats actually help with your work, or are they simply companions? Marcus thought about this for a moment. Honestly, they mostly just sleep on things and knock my pens off the desk. But sometimes, when I'm stuck on a problem or stressed about a negotiation or just tired of staring at the same documents for hours. He looked down at Marmalade, who gazed back with those optimized for hunting eyes that somehow conveyed absolute contentment. They remind me to take a break, to breathe, to remember that not everything has to be complicated. That seems inefficient. Probably. But it keeps me sane. Marcus smiled. And in a galaxy full of complicated politics and difficult negotiations, sometimes you need something simple, something warm, something that purrs. After Marcus left, Krixtal stood alone in the office for several minutes, his internal lights flickering through a spectrum of confused colors. The notebook remained on the desk, covered in orange cat hair and mysterious indentations where Marmalade had been sleeping. Krixtal approached it carefully, as though it might explode. The hair was surprisingly soft. The indentations actually did obscure paragraph 7, which would need to be rewritten. And there, in the margin, was a small doodle of a cat that Marcus had apparently drawn during a particularly boring council session. It was, objectively speaking, a terrible drawing. The proportions were wrong. The ears were too big. It looked more like a potato with whiskers than an actual feline. And yet, Krixtal found himself staring at it for longer than was strictly necessary. There was something about the complete lack of artistic skill, the casual way it had been added to an important document, the evidence of a human getting distracted from vital treaty negotiations to draw his pet. It was humanizing. That was the word. In a galaxy of perfect digital records and formal protocols, here was evidence of someone just existing, being, living alongside creatures that made him happy, even if those creatures were technically predators. Krixtal carefully photographed the notebook, cat hair and all, and transmitted it to his superiors with a single note. I believe I am beginning to understand the humans. Their response came back immediately. Should we be concerned? He looked at the drawing again. The ridiculous potato cat with its too big ears and its creator's complete lack of artistic talent. The evidence of a human taking a break from negotiating the future of 3 star systems to sketch his pet. No, Krixtal replied. But you might want to consider getting a cat. There was a long pause. Then, Ambassador, are you feeling well? Perfectly well. I merely think that if we are to work alongside humans, we should understand what makes them effective diplomats. And that involves cats. I am beginning to suspect it involves quite a lot of cats, actually. Another pause. We will take your recommendation under advisement. In the meantime, please complete the Tau Ceti negotiations. Krixtal looked at the notebook, currently adorned with enough cat hair to constitute a biological sample. There may be some delays. The primary document has been compromised by predator activity. Explain. How did one explain to the Harmonious Collective that an important treaty document was covered in cat hair because the human negotiator valued his pet's comfort over bureaucratic protocol? How did one convey that this was somehow both completely unprofessional and entirely effective? The humans, Krixtal said carefully, are teaching me about their priorities. Should we send reinforcements? He thought about Marcus, walking out with 2 purring predators in his arms, completely unbothered by their claws or teeth or potential danger. He thought about the fastest treaty negotiation in Council history, facilitated by a cat named Marmalade. He thought about the drawing in the margin, terrible and wonderful at the same time. "No," Krixtal said. "I believe I have it handled." 3 weeks later, the Harmonious Collective's flagship received an unusual request from Ambassador Krixtal. He needed approval for a cultural exchange program that would involve importing several Terran felines to the crystalline habitats of his homeworld. The Council's response was immediate and predictable. "Have you lost your luminescence?" "Possibly," Krixtal admitted. "But I have also successfully negotiated 7 new treaties, established trade agreements with 4 previously hostile species, and somehow convinced the Vrexians to reduce their military presence in the disputed sectors." "And this required cats?" "It required understanding humans. The cats are a side effect." There was a long pause while the Council processed this. Finally, "Explain your methodology." Krixtal thought about how to phrase this in a way that wouldn't get him immediately recalled for psychological evaluation. Humans are most comfortable when they can be themselves. This includes their tendency to integrate predators into professional spaces. By accepting this tendency rather than fighting it, I have created an environment where human diplomats feel safe being authentic, which in turn makes them more willing to compromise and cooperate. You are saying that accepting their insanity makes them easier to work with. Essentially, yes. And the cats help with this? The cats are both a symbol and a catalyst. They demonstrate human values, trust, companionship, the willingness to coexist with potential danger. By understanding the cats, I understand the humans. By accepting the cats, I demonstrate respect for human culture. Another pause. Then, "Ambassador Krixtal, you are either experiencing a revolutionary breakthrough in xenodiplomacy or a complete psychological breakdown. We are unsure which. Can it be both? That does not reassure us. Would it help if I mentioned that the Terran Embassy is now requesting crystalline formations for their habitats because they find our light songs soothing?" This caused what Krixtal's translator interpreted as shocked silence. "They want our sacred formations. For decorative and therapeutic purposes, yes. Apparently humans find them beautiful and calming. Several diplomats have reported reduced stress levels after installing them in their quarters. This is unprecedented. Yes. This is irregular. Yes. This is..." Another pause. "Actually quite effective as a cultural exchange. Yes." The Council debated for exactly 47 seconds, which Krixtal knew because he counted each pulse of his internal luminescence. Finally, "Approved. You may proceed with the feline importation program. But Ambassador?" "Yes? If this goes wrong, we are blaming the humans?" "Understood." 6 months later, the Harmonious Collective's embassy featured 3 cats. A black one named Midnight, a calico named Prism, and a large Maine Coon named Ambassador Fluffington, who had somehow become an unofficial diplomatic mascot. They had their own social media accounts. They attended treaty signings. They slept on important documents, and nobody complained because, as Marcus had explained, that's just what cats do. And Krixtal, ambassador of the Harmonious Collective, found himself sitting in his office at 3 a.m. station time, writing reports while Ambassador Fluffington purred on his desk and occasionally batted at his light patterns. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was also the most content he had been in his entire diplomatic career. "You know," he said to Ambassador Fluffington, who responded by yawning and flopping over his latest trade proposal. Marcus was right. You people are pretty good at this friendship thing. Ambassador Fluffington purred louder and closed his eyes, completely trusting, utterly relaxed. And Crickstal, who had spent decades believing that strength came from standing alone, carefully adjusted his work to avoid disturbing the sleeping predator on his desk. Somewhere in the station, Marcus Chen was probably dealing with his own sleeping cats, smiling at the chaos they caused, utterly unbothered by the presence of predators in his professional space. And somehow, despite all logic and reason, it worked. The galaxy was learning to coexist with humanity. And apparently, that meant learning to coexist with their cats too. Crickstal's lights flickered a contented blue, and he returned to his work, occasionally pausing to scratch behind Ambassador Fluffington's ears. The predator cubs were resting across his notebook. It was a silent moment, and it was perfect.